They didn't invite me to the baby shower. Not formally, at least. No printed card, no group message, not even a Facebook event. Just a passing comment from my son's wife while unloading groceries into the fridge I paid for. Oh, by the way, Nora, some people are stopping by Sunday. It's just a small thing for the baby. She said it with her back to me. Said it while stacking sparkling water I didn't drink onto the shelves I installed. I blinked. You mean the baby shower? She laughed lightly. Well, I guess you could call it that. More like a celebration. You don't have to worry about bringing anything. Just show up if you feel like it. Her voice was sugar and sandpaper all at once. I opened my mouth to say something. What? I don't know, but my son, Adam, walked in right then, kissed her on the cheek, and tossed me a smile like a tip.
Hey, Mom.
Excited for Sunday. So I nodded, because I didn't know what else to do. I had offered them the guest house when they first found out about the pregnancy. Said it would help them save money. Said I wanted to be close. Said I was excited to help. Turns out, there's a difference between help and servant. I bought new towels.
Stocked the pantry.
Replaced the HVAC unit when it failed midwinter. I left dinners on the back steps, answered every text about fevers and formula, babysat when they wanted a night out. I had told myself I was investing in family. Turns out I was funding convenience. The baby shower was Sunday afternoon. I dressed carefully, floral skirt, pearl earrings, a wrap I hadn't worn since my husband's retirement party. I baked lemon bars with fresh zest just like Adam liked when he was little. I arrived 5 minutes early. The front lawn was already full of cars. I knocked on the guest house door, even though I owned it. Even though I'd walked through that door to paint the nursery myself 2 months earlier. Rachel, my daughter-in-law, answered. Her face lit up with something just short of recognition.
Oh.
Nora, you made it. I held out the lemon bars, covered in foil. Of course. Congratulations. She took them with a tight smile. Thank you. We already have a ton of desserts, but I'll find space. I stepped inside. The living room was a sea of blush balloons and sage green garlands. Soft jazz hummed through a Bluetooth speaker. I didn't recognize most of the women. A few looked up, then back at their phones. One of Rachel's friends raised an eyebrow in my direction. Oh, that's Nora, Rachel said breezily, setting the lemon bars down near the back of the counter. She's been helping out since the start, like a second pair of hands. A pause. Basically like our part-time nanny.
The room laughed.
I didn't. I turned to Adam, who was leaning against the kitchen island, drink in hand. Did you hear that? I asked quietly. He blinked. What? Your wife just introduced me as a nanny. He chuckled. Babe, she didn't mean it like that. It's a joke. Come on, relax. I swallowed. A joke. He nodded. Let's not make a thing of it. Then he walked away. And I stood there, holding a cloth napkin with nobody to talk to. 10 minutes later, I asked Rachel if I could see the nursery. I hadn't been inside since painting the trim. She waved vaguely. Sure, but keep it quick. The photographer's coming soon, and I want to get a few shots in there with just family. I turned. I am family. She gave a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Of course you are. I just meant, like, the inner circle. You know what I mean? I did. I walked down the hall anyway. To the nursery, I had painted sunshine yellow because she said she didn't want to know the gender. The lemon bars were still untouched when I left. No one noticed. Back in the main house, I took off my earrings, placed them gently into a velvet-lined box, and walked to the file cabinet in my study. Bottom drawer.
Locked.
Key still tucked behind the photo of me and Adam at his high school graduation. I hadn't opened that folder in years. The title deed was where I left it. Property, 118 Meadowlark Lane, main house and secondary dwelling. Owner, Nora Jennings.
Soul.
I flipped to the lease agreement I'd written up, just to keep things clear when Adam and Rachel moved in. I had insisted they sign it. They laughed at the time.
They shouldn't have.
Clause 9. Termination with 30 days notice, no cause required. Owner discretion. I sat down at the dining room table and opened a blank document on my laptop. Subject: termination of tenancy. Secondary dwelling, guest house. Effective 30 days from date of delivery. Per Clause 9 of original lease. No anger. No italics. Just facts. I printed it on heavy paper. Cream, not white. Folded it once, placed it in an envelope, and slid it into their mailbox that night. They called me just the help. They forgot who held the deed. Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to more powerful stories like this one. The envelope sat untouched in their mailbox for 2 days. I watched from the kitchen window, watering my begonias like it was any other Tuesday. The mailbox door hung open that morning, and for a long second, Rachel stood frozen with the cream envelope in her hand. No logo, no card design, just her name in blocky black ink, written with a pen that didn't smudge. I'd taken my time. I could see the confusion ripple through her face as she tore it open. It was all there, plain, legal, final. She reread it twice. Her lips parted. She looked toward the house. Then, like she was being watched and she stuffed it back into the envelope and walked stiffly into the guest house. I went back to polishing the stovetop. The knock came that night at 8:13 p.m. Adam's voice filtered through the wood before I even got to the door. "Mom? You home?" I took my time answering. Let him wait. Let the silence sit heavy. When I opened the door, his face was pale with confusion, like a boy sent to the principal's office for something he didn't know he did wrong. "Is this some kind of mistake?" he asked, holding up the notice like it was evidence in a trial. "Rachel found this in the mailbox." "It's not a mistake," I said, stepping aside. "But you can come in if you want to sit."
He did.
Rachel didn't come with him. Adam walked past the entryway table, where a small ceramic dish held 2 keys and an unopened envelope from the electric company. His eyes flicked toward the dining table, where a legal pad sat with a neatly written to-do list. Notify attorney. Schedule locksmith. Clear attic storage. "You're really serious," he said finally, settling into a dining chair like it had suddenly become a courtroom bench. I poured myself tea. Didn't offer him any. "Why?" he asked. "Why now?" I set the teapot down gently. "Do you remember when Dad was sick?" He blinked. "Of course. You were away at college. Rachel had just started working. I was here. Every night. Changing his bandages, taking calls with the hospice nurse, paying bills, keeping the house together. Do you remember what I told you after he passed? That we'd always have each other." I nodded. "And that I'd never ask for anything but respect." He looked down. "I offered you the guest house because I believed in family. I believed in investing in the next generation. But I think Rachel misunderstood what kind of investment that was." Adam leaned forward, voice low. "She didn't mean to call you the help, Mom. It was a joke." "That nobody laughed at," I said sharply. "Not even you." He blinked. "And when she told her friends I was the nanny? When she said I wasn't in the inner circle? Was that also a joke?" He rubbed his hands together like he was trying to warm himself from a cold that wasn't physical. "You could have just talked to us," he said. "You didn't have to go straight to a legal notice." "I did talk," I said softly. "I've been talking for years. You just stopped hearing it when it wasn't convenient." His shoulders sagged. "You're kicking us out." I corrected him. "I'm ending a tenancy. A legal agreement. You're still my son, Adam. But you're also a grown man who let someone else redraw the family portrait without me in it." The room went quiet. Even the old fridge stopped humming. "I don't know where we'll go," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "You have 30 days, I replied. "Same as any tenant." He stood slowly, and for a second, I saw that boy again, the one who used to run into my arms with scraped knees and science fair ribbons. "I wish you'd told me sooner," he said quietly. "I did," I replied. "You just didn't think I'd ever act on it." He walked to the door.
Paused.
"Is there anything we can do to fix it?" "Fixing," I said, "starts with acknowledging what was broken." He nodded faintly, stepped out, and closed the door behind him. The house was quiet again. But it didn't feel empty. It felt honest. That night, I pulled out the photo album Rachel had once called clutter during spring cleaning. Flipping through the pages, I found the picture of Adam on his third birthday, wearing a paper crown, frosting on his nose, sitting in my lap. I slid it out and placed it in a new frame beside my bed. Not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder. Love remembers. So does dignity. The next morning came colder than expected. April was supposed to bring softness, blossoms on the dogwood, fresh breeze through the curtains. But Nora stood at the edge of her garden in a wool cardigan, arms crossed, breath visible. The air wasn't biting, it was bitter, like it carried something unsaid. From her vantage point near the hydrangeas, she watched Rachel exit the guest house, phone in hand, sunglasses on, latte in the other. She walked like someone who had curated the moment, hoodie off one shoulder, bun effortlessly messy, the stroller wheeling ahead of her like a declaration. Look how busy I am. Look how together. Rachel didn't glance up once at the main house, just kept tapping at her phone as the baby fussed lightly. Nora didn't wave. She didn't smile. She simply turned back to her tulips and gently clipped a stem that had bent overnight in the cold. The silence between them now had edges. That evening, Nora found an email in her inbox. Subject: Quick clarification Notice. Hi Nora. I know you probably didn't mean it this way, but Adam and I were surprised by the lease notice. Just wanted to clarify, are you really asking us to leave? Or was that just a reaction to the baby shower mix-up? Totally understand if you were feeling left out, but I wish you'd come to us first. Anyway, hoping this is just a misunderstanding. Let's find time to sit down and talk this through. Love. Rachel. Nora read it twice, then a third time. She didn't reply. Instead, she printed the email, added it to a growing manila folder labeled residency documentation, and clipped a sticky note to it. Minimization. Deflection. Zero accountability. The next 2 days were filled with small shifts. Tense silence. Slammed drawers. The sound of Rachel on the phone just a little too loud. Laughter a little too pointed. Then, on Thursday afternoon, the sound of hammering came from the backyard. Nora stepped onto her porch with a mug of tea and squinted toward the guest house. Rachel stood with a contractor, one she didn't recognize, gesturing toward the wooden fence that separated the two units. The baby squealed from a playpen nearby. The contractor nodded and began measuring. Nora didn't even hesitate. She walked down the steps, across the lawn, and stopped 6 feet from them. Is there something going up I should know about? She asked calmly. Rachel turned, startled, but only for a second.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, I thought we'd just put up a privacy screen. Make it cozier back here for the baby. It's temporary. She smiled as if it were a gift. The contractor said it's no big deal. Shouldn't take more than a day. Nora raised an eyebrow. Did the contractor also say whose land you were building on? Rachel blinked. Well, it's shared space, isn't it? Nora inhaled slowly.
No.
It's not. This isn't a duplex. It's a main property with a guest house. The yard belongs to the main house. Always has. Rachel's expression cracked for a moment, the smile faltering just enough to show her teeth. Nora, we've been using this space for 2 years. You've been borrowing it, Nora corrected. Now I'm asking you to return it. A beat passed. Rachel looked at the contractor and gave a tight nod. Can you give us a minute? He walked off toward the driveway, toolbox in hand. When it was just the two of them, Rachel folded her arms. This feels personal. Nora tilted her head. It is. Rachel scoffed. You're seriously evicting your own son and grandchild over what? A party? Nora met her gaze. I'm enforcing a lease. And I'm reclaiming my home. Do you even hear yourself? I hear everything, Rachel. I heard you tell your friends I was basically staff. I heard you say I was part of the extended circle. I heard you exclude me from a family I helped build with my own hands and then mock me for still showing up. Rachel's jaw tensed. That's not fair. What's not fair, Nora replied, is being erased in your own house while funding someone else's lifestyle. There was a flicker of panic now, quick and subtle. Rachel took a step forward. This will tear Adam apart. He doesn't deserve this. No, Nora said, voice calm. He deserves a wife who respects the people who raised him. Rachel flushed. You're making a huge mistake. No, Nora said. I made the mistake 2 years ago, letting you move in without clear boundaries. This, she gestured toward the now dismantled wood pile, is me correcting it. Rachel's hands balled into fists. You're lucky I even let you stay part of the baby's life. Nora went still. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. She simply said, "That's the last time you speak to me like I'm optional." Then she turned and walked away, tea still warm in her hand, dignity fully intact. That night, Nora emailed her lawyer. Subject: Notice enforcement timeline. Hi Marla. Please confirm legal prep for removal if needed. Also requesting review of outdoor structure clauses. They attempted to begin construction without permission. PS tenant referred to eviction as personal attack. Would like language on file to reflect lease violation, not emotional claim. NJ. Marla's reply came within the hour. Absolutely. Everything's enforceable as is. You're protected. Let me know if you want me to draft a formal follow-up. Nora replied, yes. Let's make it official. I'm tired of being polite about ownership. The town had always been small enough that people noticed everything, and polite enough that no one ever said it to your face. So when Rachel showed up to Sunday service alone, hair undone, sunglasses still on inside, the whispers began before the third hymn ended. Nora heard them from the third pew, where she had moved back to sitting recently. Not the front row. She wasn't staking claims, just reclaiming space that had once been hers before she was gently nudged out to help with refreshments. She didn't look back at Rachel, not even when Pastor Trent mentioned a prayer request for families navigating transition and communication struggles. His eyes flicked toward both of them. Nora didn't flinch. After service, as the congregation flowed into the foyer like slow-moving water, Rachel made her way over. Oh, Nora, she said sweetly, placing a hand on Nora's arm like they were good friends at a book club. Can we chat for a moment? Nora didn't break stride. Of course, she said. Out front. They stepped into the sunlight together, the smell of lilac and aftershave hanging in the spring air. A few heads turned, pretended not to listen. Nora didn't care. She was done making herself smaller for the sake of someone else's comfort. Rachel smiled, brittle and bright. So, obviously people are talking. I'm sure they are. Rachel leaned in closer. Look, I think we're both adults here. We can make this go away. Adam and I can stay a little longer, just until summer, when the lease on his friend's condo opens up. No need to involve lawyers or church gossip. Nora blinked. You think I care about church gossip? Rachel's smile faltered. Well, I mean your reputation. I know exactly what my reputation is, Nora said, cutting her off. It's the woman who helped organize every harvest festival this town's ever had. The woman who led the caregiving committee when Jean was dying. The woman who raised a boy on her own, put him through college, and then handed him a house key before she got a thank you. Rachel's mouth opened, then closed again. So no, Nora continued. I don't mind people talking. What I mind is you standing here pretending this was ever about fairness. Rachel's hand dropped from Nora's arm. People are going to think you're bitter, she said, the first hint of real venom in her voice. I'm not bitter, Nora replied. I'm documented. Rachel frowned. What does that mean? It means I've saved every text, every lease update, every violation of the agreement you signed. I've got timestamps on the renovation you tried to start, proof of misuse of shared storage, and photos of the garden damage from last spring. This isn't drama, Rachel. This is paper. Rachel's lips parted in disbelief. You've been building a case? Nora nodded. Quietly, respectfully, thoroughly. Rachel looked like she had been slapped. I can't believe you'd rather kick us out than just be a part of this family. You made it clear I wasn't part of the family when you introduced me as just the help, Nora said. This is just the response you didn't think I'd have the spine to give. At that, she turned and walked away, no flounce, no rush. Just measured dignity. Back home, Nora opened her desk drawer and removed a small brass box. Inside were 3 spare keys, front, back, and guest house. She placed the guest house key into a padded envelope and labeled it, "Return to owner, no duplicates." Then she placed it in a lockbox with a digital code and scheduled a locksmith to rekey the entire property in 3 days. That evening, Adam knocked on the door. Not the side door. The front. She opened it and saw him standing there, hands in his pockets, like he used to when he was 5 and had been caught with a broken vase. "Mom, can we talk? You're here now, aren't you?" He stepped inside. His eyes scanned the living room, stopping briefly on a stack of neatly sorted folders: property title, lease agreement, legal notices. He said nothing about them. Instead, he walked toward the fireplace and ran a hand over the mantel. "Rachel says you've gone full scorched earth." Nora didn't laugh. Rachel always had a flair for the dramatic. "She's not doing great," Adam admitted, glancing at his feet. Nora raised an eyebrow. "And you came here to fix her mess?" "I came here," he said, "because I need to know if this is really the end."
She paused.
"Adam," she said softly, "you let your wife erase me from our family without blinking. You called it convenience. You called it boundaries. You watched me disappear into the background of my own life." He looked up, eyes stinging. "I didn't mean to, but you did it anyway." Silence sat heavy between them. "I'm not trying to hurt you," she said, "but I will not continue funding a family I'm not invited to be part of." He nodded slowly. "And the house. You have 3 weeks left. After that, I'm changing the locks and clearing the guest house. If you want to rent somewhere nearby, I'll even co-sign. But not on my land. Not anymore." He nodded again, more slowly this time. Before he left, she handed him a printed copy of the new access schedule, color-coded and signed. "You'll be receiving a letter from my lawyer confirming everything." He took the page, folded it neatly, and slipped it into his jacket. "You always said love was shown in actions."
"And so it is," she said.
"Which is why I'm done showing it to people who only return it with demands." He didn't have a reply. After he left, Nora went into the kitchen and pulled out an old bottle of red wine she'd been saving for her next birthday. She poured 1 glass, sat alone at the table, and toasted herself.
To peace.
To proof. To finally choosing herself. The flyer showed up on Nora's front porch on a Wednesday, printed on pale blue cardstock, adorned with daisies in the corners. It was folded twice and tucked under the welcome mat like a secret. But nothing stayed secret for long on Sycamore Lane. Community Baby Celebration, Saturday at 2 p.m., hosted by the Friends of Rachel Jennings. Nora held it between her fingers, eyes scanning the bold font. Her name wasn't mentioned anywhere. Neither was Adam's. She turned the flyer over. On the back, in small print, "To honor a new mother who's shown grace in difficult family circumstances." She stared at that line for a long time. Then she folded the flyer in half, walked calmly to the trash bin, and dropped it in. She didn't need to ask who had written it. The tone had Rachel's fingerprints all over it, faux spiritual uplift layered over a bitter insult, like a compliment with a blade tucked inside. But Nora wasn't shaken. Not anymore. Instead, she opened her desk drawer and pulled out her property ledger, handwritten, indexed, annotated. It started in 1994, the year she and her late husband first bought the lot. Every fence post, every roofing repair, every permit signed and inspection passed. She'd kept it all. She flipped to the back, where she'd recently added a new section, tenant adjustments. She listed expenses Rachel had promised to cover but never did: $7.20 for landscaping, $94 for water overflow after baby bath toys blocked the gutter, $163 for a replacement oven knob after it just came off in her hand. And one entry in red ink. April 3rd, attempted construction without permission. Unauthorized contractor on premises. No written request filed. She snapped a photo of that page and attached it to an email to her attorney, Marla, adding to the documentation trail. Sending a courtesy letter to the HOA this week confirming sole ownership. Rachel's begun making public statements implying instability. "I'd like to get ahead of that. Best. Nora." Marla replied within the hour. "Good thinking." I'll draft language affirming your capacity and current legal status. We'll keep the record clean and proactive. The next morning, Nora hand-delivered a sealed envelope to the HOA Dropbox. To whom it may concern. This letter is to formally reaffirm that I, Nora Jennings, am the sole legal owner of the property at 118 Meadowlark Lane, including the main house and guest house unit. No other individuals hold legal claim or shared authority. I remain of sound mind and full legal capacity. Should there be any confusion, I am happy to provide documentation and legal counsel to confirm. Please direct all future inquiries regarding residency, property modifications, or disputes directly to me or my attorney. Warmly, Nora Jennings. It wasn't petty. It was preventative. Because later that same day, she overheard it. In the produce section of Jacob's Market, just behind the apples. She's not well, you know, a voice whispered. Nora reached for a Honeycrisp and casually turned her head. It was Kathy from the prayer circle, talking to Marlene from the book swap. I heard she's been hoarding paperwork and talking to lawyers, Kathy murmured, barely masking the glee in her voice. Oh, bless her heart, Marlene replied. I guess when your family pushes you out, it can do things. Nora stepped around the display, smiling politely. Ladies. They both froze like children caught sneaking cookies. She raised her bag of apples. You'll be glad to know the paperwork's alphabetized, not hoarded. And the lawyers? Paid in full. Same as my mortgage. Kathy flushed. Nora, we were just praying for me? Nora smiled tightly. Then you'll want to include strength, not sanity. I have plenty of the second. She didn't wait for them to respond, just dropped her fruit into the cart and walked on. That night, she stood outside the guest house with a clipboard. Adam had agreed, reluctantly, to begin the packing process early. He wasn't there tonight, but Rachel was. She opened the door holding a glass of rose, her eyes narrowed. I saw you at the store. I know. You humiliated me. No, Nora said, stepping inside. You did that when you told people I was senile. Rachel's mouth opened.
Closed.
I have neighbors asking if I need help around the house. I have the pastor checking in twice in 1 week. I've lived here 26 years, Rachel. I've buried my husband here. I have a better track record with this town than you have with any of your Pinterest boards. Rachel said nothing. Nora walked over to the corner of the room and picked up a box labeled nursery. I'm here to do an inventory of remaining property. You have until the 28th. After that, anything left behind is considered abandoned and will be donated. You're unhinged. No, Nora said without turning. I'm done being erased in my own home. She opened a drawer in the hallway. Inside were 2 missing dessert forks from her mother's silver set. Ones Rachel had claimed were probably lost in the move. She set them aside in her own box. Item by item, she moved through the space. By the end of the hour, she had a half-dozen small pieces in her possession. Trivial things, perhaps. A serving platter. A family photo Adam never framed. Her copy of To Kill a Mockingbird that had ended up in the baby's bookshelf. As she prepared to leave, Rachel stood at the doorway. You think you've won. Nora turned and said, quietly, I think I remembered who I am. She walked past her, not once looking back. Back in the main house, she set the small box of recovered items on her dining table. Then she pulled out a sheet of thick ivory paper and began writing in smooth, deliberate script. To be filed with will amendment. If ever I am spoken about in past tense while I am still living, if I am treated like an obligation instead of an origin, I retain the right to redraw every line of legacy, legally and spiritually. She signed it, folded it, and slid it into the front of her estate folder. They had tried to define her as a shadow. But shadows always stretch farther than the eye expects. Nora circled May 1st on her kitchen calendar with red ink. Not because it was a special day. Because it was eviction day. The 30-day notice period was officially up. And as of noon, the guest house that had become a mausoleum of passive aggression, entitled parenting, and silent sacrifice would no longer belong to Adam and Rachel. They hadn't gone quietly. Not that she expected them to. In the past 2 weeks, Rachel had posted no less than 4 cryptic Instagram stories, screenshots of poems about toxic elders, moody black and white photos of baby Ezra with captions like, "Some people are just seasonal, even if they share your blood," and a boomerang of herself packing boxes, middle finger subtly extended, layered with the phrase, "Resetting my peace." Nora didn't follow her, but Kathy from the prayer circle did. And Kathy sent screenshots. Nora never responded. She just saved them all to a PDF labeled Public Narrative Manipulation, screenshots, and added it to her estate folder. On the morning of April 30th, Nora placed a call to Lighthouse Transitions, a local moving service that specialized in short-notice removals and temporary storage. "Yes," she said firmly. "Guest house contents. 2 bedrooms. Wrap fragile items, but no need to label. They'll be going to a storage locker. Tenants are aware. Contract is in writing. I'll meet your team with the key at 9 a.m. She hung up and walked to the guest house with a folder in hand and a clipboard under her arm. The front door was open. So was the kitchen cabinet, 2 drawers, and a pack of wipes that had spilled onto the floor. Rachel stood barefoot in the middle of the living room, holding a bottle of baby lotion and looking like she'd just been interrupted mid-self-care ritual. "You're early," she said, not quite angry, not quite civil. "You're late," Nora replied. "Technically, you were supposed to vacate yesterday evening." Rachel rolled her eyes and walked to the sink. "I told Adam I needed an extra day." "You seriously brought movers? That's dramatic." Nora held up the lease agreement. "You signed this. Clause 14. All possessions remaining after move-out date are subject to storage or disposal at owner discretion." Rachel stared at her. "You're really going to throw away your family's memories?" "They're not my memories," Nora said, voice calm. "They're your mess." Rachel took a step closer. "You're going to regret this." "No, Rachel. I regret letting it go this long." A van rolled into the driveway behind them.
White. Clean.
The logo printed in blue. Lighthouse Transitions, clean starts for new chapters. 3 movers stepped out, friendly, no nonsense, ready. Rachel's jaw tightened. "You scheduled them behind our backs?" Nora handed the clipboard to the lead mover. "Inventory list is highlighted. Focus on closets and the 2nd bedroom. No need to pack the kitchen. They took most of it already." Rachel stormed off down the hallway and slammed a door. The baby wailed in the background. For a second, Nora's heart tugged. Ezra's cry still sounded like Adam's used to when he got a splinter. That soft, startled panic that trusted someone would fix it. But this time, she didn't rush in with a bandage. She didn't bring warm milk. She didn't cradle anyone. Because she had finally learned, love doesn't mean abandoning your own voice to keep someone else's peace. At 12:03 p.m., the last box was sealed. The last lamp unplugged. The movers wheeled the final bin out the back door as Rachel stood on the porch, arms crossed, eyes glassy. "This is going to make you look awful," she hissed. "You think the community's on your side now, but once this gets out..." Nora held up her phone.
"Already out," she said.
"The HOA received my ownership clarification. The church has my donation record and my legal statement. And the town? They've seen me care for this property for over 2 decades." She stepped closer. "Meanwhile, they've seen you take from it like it owed you something. That's what they'll remember." Rachel looked away. "Don't worry," Nora added. "I arranged a storage unit for 30 days. After that, it's considered abandoned." "What about Ezra?" Rachel asked suddenly, like a last-minute Hail Mary. "You think this doesn't affect him?" Nora's expression softened, not out of pity, but from clean resolve. "One day he'll ask about me," she said. "And when he does, I'll have photos, receipts, and a story that doesn't need to be edited for damage control." Rachel didn't respond. By sunset, the guest house was empty. Nora stood in the doorway, surveying the blank walls, the patch of peeled paint where they'd hung their engagement photo, the faint outline of a sticker decal that had said, "Ezra's Little Kingdom." She didn't cry. She didn't gloat. She just stepped inside with a small pail of sage green paint and started covering the past, one clean stroke at a time. Later that night, Adam called. I just got home, he said quietly. Rachel's hysterical. She had 30 days. I know, he whispered. But I didn't think you'd actually do it. You're still thinking like a son. I had to start thinking like a property owner.
He was quiet for a long time.
I didn't know you had this in you. I didn't either, she said. Until you both made me invisible. He started to say something, then paused. I'll call you soon. You always say that. And then she hung up. Not in anger, but because she didn't need to wait anymore. That night, she slept with the windows open and the porch light off. For the first time in years, the silence felt like it belonged to her. The doorbell rang at exactly 11:47 a.m. on Tuesday. Not the old-fashioned buzz Nora had grown up with, but a sharp, confident ding-dong like the sound someone makes when they expect to be let in. Nora opened the door to find Rachel standing there, arms full. Not with boxes, not even with Ezra, but with a single manila folder and a lavender-scented gift bag. Nora stared at the bag. Rachel gave a nervous laugh. Peace offering. Nora raised one eyebrow. For whom? Rachel looked tired. Her cheeks were flushed, her blouse slightly wrinkled, mascara smudged at the corners like she'd gotten halfway through a cry and gave up. I figured maybe we could talk. Just the two of us. Nora stepped aside without a word and gestured toward the sitting room. Not because she wanted to, because when people came bearing folders, you let them say their piece, and then you kept your own copy. They sat across from one another. The same chairs that had once held baby shower gifts and congratulations now cradled silence and stiff posture. Rachel opened the folder and slid a sheet of paper across the coffee table. It was a letter. 3 paragraphs. Nora didn't pick it up. Rachel started, voice thin. It's basically an apology. Look, I know I've made mistakes. I said things I shouldn't have. But this whole thing, the movers, the storage unit, the locks, it was a lot. Nora said nothing. Rachel rushed on. I know you felt pushed out, but I was just trying to make space for our new life. I didn't mean for it to come across like you weren't welcome. Nora tilted her head. You called me extended family. You told your friends I was the nanny. You referred to my lemon bars as store-bought energy in a foil wrapper. Did that all feel welcoming to you? Rachel flushed. I was overwhelmed, she said, picking at the handle of the gift bag. New mom, new space, hormones. I made mistakes. And double down on them, Nora added, voice calm. Rachel shifted. Okay.
Yes.
I was wrong. But do we really need to keep going down this warpath? Ezra doesn't even know what's going on, but he'll feel it. He'll feel the distance. Nora leaned forward now, hands folded. You're not here because of Ezra. You're here because you're afraid of the long-term consequences. You're realizing I wasn't just funding your lifestyle. I was underwriting your image. Rachel's eyes widened slightly. You told the neighborhood I was slipping, that I was acting out, that I needed help. I didn't mean. I have screenshots. Nora cut in. From Kathy. From Carol. From my lawyer. Rachel exhaled like a balloon slowly losing air. So, what now? Are you just cutting us off forever? Nora finally picked up the letter. She read it slowly once. Then again. It was fine. Not heartfelt. Not cruel. Just corporate-sounding humility wrapped in generic pleasantries. I'm not here to punish you, she said at last. But I am done sponsoring your comfort while being erased. She reached into the drawer of her console and pulled out a slim envelope of her own. Inside, 2 documents. 1, she said, sliding the top page across, is the final amendment to my estate plan. As of this week, neither you nor Adam are direct beneficiaries. Rachel's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The house has been placed in a trust to be converted into a women's housing initiative upon my passing. The guest house will provide subsidized housing for displaced caretakers, like the kind I once was. Rachel blinked, stunned. The second page, Nora continued, is a conditional clause. If, within the next 3 years, you and Adam complete 6 community volunteer projects together, documented with photos and statements, and enroll Ezra in a public early childhood empathy program, I will reconsider restoring partial inheritance. Rachel picked up the papers, brows furrowed. You're bribing us to volunteer? No, Nora said plainly. I'm requiring character to be demonstrated in order for legacy to be received. Rachel laughed once, brittle and desperate. You're insane. No, Nora said, rising. I'm principled. She walked to the door and opened it. Rachel stood slowly, face unreadable. You'll regret this. Nora gave a half smile. I regret not doing it sooner. Rachel walked out, folder in hand. She paused on the porch, like she wanted to say something else. But then she just stepped down the stairs and into her waiting car, a white SUV with a cracked bumper and an expired registration sticker Nora had quietly paid to replace last year. She didn't wave. Nora didn't watch her drive away. Instead, she returned to her desk, opened her laptop, and added a new entry to her legal timeline. May 2nd, delivered conditional legacy clause. Response, defensive, minimal contrition. No ownership of prior actions taken. Recommendation, proceed with current estate structure. Later that evening, she received a text from Adam.
Mom.
Just saw what you handed Rachel. Is this really final? I can't believe you're treating us like tenants and clients instead of family. She stared at the screen for a long time, then typed. You called me the help. You're lucky I wrote conditions instead of erasing you altogether. No reply, but she didn't need one. That night, Nora made herself a cup of green tea, lit a lavender candle, and sat on her back porch under a sky that didn't ask her for explanations. The moon was soft, the air still, and the silence? It was earned. The invitation came in a thick ivory envelope, sealed with gold foil and addressed in elegant handwriting. Mrs. Nora Jennings. Community Service Recognition Luncheon. May 15th, Sycamore Civic Hall. Nora opened it with steady hands, her thumb grazing the embossed lettering. Inside, the message was clear. In honor of your decades of service, mentorship, and personal contributions to community development, the Board of Civic Advisors would like to formally recognize you at this year's honoree luncheon. She set the card down next to her tea and exhaled. Not from surprise. From quiet affirmation. Because while Rachel had tried to smear her reputation with whispers and emojis, Nora had chosen something else. Receipts. The kind that didn't expire. The kind that lived in church bulletins, civic archives, notarized deeds, and stained glass memorial plaques with her husband's name etched beside hers. 2 days later, her photo appeared in the Sycamore Weekly. From teacher to pillar, Nora Jennings to be honored for lifelong contribution to local community. The article included quotes from Pastor Trent, Councilwoman Diane Marsh, and even the mayor. What it didn't include, any mention of Adam, or Rachel, or Ezra. She hadn't removed them. She just hadn't needed them to tell her story. But that didn't stop Rachel from trying to rewrite it again. That Thursday, Rachel posted a family update on Facebook. Some of you know we've been going through a hard season. We're choosing peace. Grateful for those who stood by us when others chose paperwork over people. Ezra's thriving. We move forward with love. Nora didn't comment, didn't like, didn't share. Instead, she sent a message to her goddaughter, Lisa, a pediatric nurse who had helped design the empathy program Nora had recommended for Ezra. Does your early education nonprofit have space for one more scholarship child? Lisa replied within minutes. For your grandson? Always. Consider it done. Nora replied, thank you.
No one has to know it was me.
Just make sure he gets a spot. Because boundaries didn't mean bitterness. And legacy didn't mean enabling. The following weekend, the Civic Hall was filled with folding chairs, white tablecloths, and polite applause. Council members gave speeches. Old neighbors shared warm anecdotes. And then, it was Nora's turn to speak. She stood in a soft navy dress, hair pinned neatly, a single silver pin at her collar, her husband's initials. The room quieted. I want to thank you, she began, voice steady. Not just for this recognition, but for the years you trusted me with your children, your projects, and sometimes your messes. Light laughter. I've been called a lot of things in this town: mentor, mother, neighbor, teacher. But I think the role I'm proudest of is listener. Because when you listen long enough, you learn what people need, not just what they want. She paused, then looked out over the sea of familiar faces. I've learned recently that boundaries aren't punishments. They're signs of self-respect. That silence doesn't mean surrender. And that grace, when extended too long without reciprocation, becomes self-erasure. She smiled then, not small, not tight.
Whole.
So, if I've left any legacy behind, I hope it's this: choose your peace as deliberately as you chose your pain. And write your own story before someone else tries to footnote it out of existence. The applause was real, not loud, but sustained. After the ceremony, Pastor Trent approached her near the refreshment table. "You look lighter," he said, handing her a slice of lemon cake. "I feel lighter," she replied. No more closets full of someone else's boxes. No more pretending the erasure didn't hurt. He nodded. Adam came by last week. Asked if he could start volunteering with a teen group again. Nora raised an eyebrow. Did he say why? Just that he wants Ezra to grow up with better examples than he had. Nora didn't reply, but she did make a note to call Lisa again and ask for Ezra's program progress once a quarter. On her way out of the civic hall, someone tapped her shoulder. It was Marlene from the book swap. "I owe you an apology," she said, eyes soft. "I believed a version of the story that wasn't yours. But I've watched. And you're the only one who's never tried to convince us you were right." Nora smiled. Truth doesn't need a spotlight, just a record. That night, back at home, she lit a candle in the kitchen and made herself chamomile tea. On the dining table sat a single object, a closed manila folder with the words "Legacy Draft" final printed across the front. She had rewritten her will for the last time. Inside were new provisions: an annual scholarship in her name for women over 50 returning to school, a donation to the hospice center that cared for her husband, and a clause that would allow Ezra, and only Ezra, to inherit a portion of the estate if he wrote her a letter of his own volition after his 18th birthday. Not Rachel, not Adam, Ezra. Because healing doesn't always skip a generation. Sometimes it just waits for the right one. As the candle flickered beside her, Nora took a deep breath and wrote one last note in her ledger. "They wanted me invisible. I left instructions."
And a spotlight.
The knock came just after sunrise. Nora was in her sunroom, barefoot, watering her jade plant. The light hadn't fully reached across the yard yet, and the wind carried a chill that hinted at late spring's unpredictability. She hadn't had company in weeks. Not since the civic luncheon. Not since the photos of her accepting the award were posted on the church bulletin board, next to a framed flyer for the new women's housing initiative now registered under her name. She assumed it was the mailman. It wasn't. Adam stood at her door, holding nothing, not a folder, not a gift bag, not even a cup of peace-offering coffee. Just his hands jammed deep into the pockets of his faded gray hoodie, like he was 15 again and didn't know where else to put his regret. Nora opened the door slowly, quietly. "Did you forget something?" she asked. "I'm not here to ask for anything," Adam said quickly. I wanted to talk." She studied him for a moment. He looked smaller. Not thinner, not shorter, just less puffed up. Like whatever weight he'd been carrying had finally settled into something too heavy to deny. "Come in," she said, not warmly, not coldly, just plainly. He followed her to the kitchen where the kettle was already starting to hum. "Tea," she offered. He nodded. They sat at the kitchen table. The one he'd once spilled juice on when he was 9, the one she'd buffed out herself with sandpaper and polish, never mentioning the faint ring that never quite faded. Adam's eyes fell on the framed quote near the back wall. "Respect doesn't raise its voice. It keeps the receipts." He exhaled a short breath. "Rachel left," he said, eyes focused on the teabag tag bobbing in his cup. Nora didn't react. She said she didn't marry someone who let things fall apart without taking sides. "Did you?" she asked. He looked up, startled. "Take a side?" Adam swallowed. "I didn't think I needed to. I thought silence meant I wasn't making things worse." Nora nodded slowly. Silence does that. It tricks you into thinking neutrality is compassion.
He looked down again.
She said you changed, he said. I did. I think I just didn't know who you were when you weren't cleaning up for everyone. Nora's lip twitched. Not a smile, just acknowledgement. They sat for a while in silence. The good kind. The real kind. No ice, no smirks, no underlying strategy. Then he reached into his hoodie and pulled out something folded. A sheet of paper. I found this when we were packing. It's from Dad's desk. He unfolded it and slid it across the table. It was a note. Simple. Slanted handwriting. Nora is the heart of this house. The rest of us just rent space in it. Nora's throat tightened. She hadn't seen that in years. She remembered him scribbling it down after she made 3 meals in one day while he was recovering from surgery. I kept waiting for you to explode, Adam said quietly. For you to yell, to accuse, to storm out. I did explode, she said. I just used documents instead of decibels. He gave a weak laugh. I didn't recognize what strength looked like when it was quiet, he said. No one does, she replied. Until the floor you thought would always catch you is gone. He nodded, took another sip. I'm not here to ask for inheritance, he said, voice steady now. Or for you to change anything. I know I forfeited that. Nora looked at him, eyes clear. Then why are you here? He blinked. Because Ezra started asking where Nana is. A long pause. I didn't know what to tell him, he continued. I didn't want to lie. And I didn't want to pass on bitterness. But I didn't know how to explain distance. She sat with that for a moment, then said, You don't need to explain the distance, Adam. Just teach him how to close it without stepping on someone else's worth. He nodded. Nora rose, walked to the drawer by the stove, and pulled out a small envelope. Inside, a photo. Ezra, age 1, in a yellow jumper, holding Nora's finger. I kept this, she said, placing it on the table, because it reminded me that even if I'm erased in stories, I still exist in moments. He picked it up with shaking hands. Can I tell him you sent it? You can tell him I remembered, she said softly. He nodded. She walked him to the door, and before he stepped out, he turned. If things ever change, if I ever. She raised a hand. Start showing. That's all. Don't tell me. Show me.
He nodded again.
Anne left. Nora didn't cry. She just went to the sunroom, sat beside the jade plant, and wrote a single line in her journal. A boy came back today.
Not to take. Just to see.
She closed the book and looked out at the yard that was finally fully hers. Spring gave way to early summer like a curtain being drawn open. Nora stood on her front porch in a soft linen blouse, the morning air sweet with the scent of peonies blooming along the front path. She sipped her tea slowly, her fingers tracing the edge of the ceramic mug, a handmade gift from a student she'd once mentored. It read, in imperfect glaze, "Thank you for making space for people to become." She didn't need the words anymore, but they felt good in her hand. Across the yard, the guest house door opened, not to Rachel, not to Adam, but to the new tenant. A retired social worker named Eileen, who had spent 20 years helping domestic abuse survivors rebuild their lives. She walked with a limp and a Labrador mix named Willow who never barked, just padded quietly behind her like an old soul. Eileen waved. Nora waved back. No demands. No drama. No expectations. Just gratitude. Nora's inbox that morning had 2 messages. One from her attorney, Marla. All final filings complete. Title officially transferred to Legacy Haven Trust. Guest house lease recorded. Property tax status updated. You are fully clear. The second from Lisa, her goddaughter, who ran the child empathy nonprofit. Ezra starts this week. He's shy but bright. We'll take good care of him. Thank you for what you didn't say, as much as what you did. Nora didn't reply right away. Instead, she opened the safe in her study and removed a single sealed envelope. Inside, her last will and testament, stamped and signed. Also inside, a handwritten letter marked, "For Ezra, age 18 and only then." She had written it 2 weeks ago. In it, she said, "I loved you from the moment I knew you were coming. I painted your nursery. I baked lemon bars for your baby shower. I kept every photo where I was cut out of the frame, not because it hurt, but because it reminded me what quiet love looks like. I never needed a thank you, just a place in your memory. This house didn't make me strong. Losing it to expectations did. Reclaiming it made me whole. If you're reading this, you've made it. Not just into adulthood, but into understanding. If you still want to know me, I left a garden map under the kitchen floorboard in the guest house. It'll show you where I planted everything, even the things that didn't grow. You'll find your name there too, right beside the lavender." She sealed the letter again, placed it back into the safe, and turned the key with a slow click. At noon, the doorbell rang. It was Councilwoman Diane and Pastor Trent, arriving with a photographer and a small frame. They had come to hang a plaque. She opened the door without hesitation. "It's official," Diane said, holding up the bronze square. "This property is now registered as a historic preservation site, and the community initiative under your trust is launching next quarter." The plaque read, "The Jennings House, Legacy of Shelter, Growth, and Grace. Established 1996. Reclaimed 2025. Preserved in honor of Nora Jennings." Nora stepped aside to let them through. They hung it beside the front door, the same one Rachel used to slam when she wanted Nora to feel small, the same one Adam once fixed with borrowed tools and forgotten thanks. Now, it bore Nora's name, not as a footnote, but as a foundation. After they left, she stood at the door, fingers grazing the edges of the plaque. Then she turned and walked to her desk, opened a new journal, and wrote, "They silenced me in pictures. I wrote my name in law. They called me extra. I made myself central. They mistook grace for passivity. But grace, when directed inward, becomes power. And power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just closes the door, locks it, and plants something new outside it." That evening, as the sky turned golden and Willow barked gently at a squirrel in the garden, Nora made herself a simple dinner, roasted vegetables and fresh bread. She ate on the back porch, where the garden now grew wild and intentional at once. She heard a child's laugh from down the street, a bicycle bell, the sound of someone knocking gently at Eileen's door. And she smiled, not because everything was fixed, but because she no longer had to fix everything. As the last of the sun touched her cheek, she raised her glass, not a toast, just a gesture. To the home, to herself, to all the women who had ever been treated like square footage instead of structure. And to the ones who finally learned. They weren't part of the story. They were the deed. They cut me out of the family photo, so I put my name on the deed. If this story hit home, don't scroll, drop a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you're subscribed. Because sometimes, quiet revenge speaks the loudest.